The calls for reform are coming from inside the court. This week, Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan publicly calling for Chief Justice Roberts to appoint a panel of judges that would enforce a new code of conduct adopted by the court in November. Kagan saying, quote, rules usually have enforcement mechanisms attached to them, and this set of rules does not. The Supreme Court has been dogged by demands for reform after several controversial rulings that have overturned precedent left and right. But now President Joe Biden is entering the chat, vowing to focus on the court as he sunsets his presidency.
Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. And I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy.
Joining me now, my friend Elie Mystal, correspondent for The Nation, host of Contempt of Court podcast, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Institution. Elie, it's always so good to see you. Before I get to your latest piece of The Nation, which I thought was fantastic, I do want to talk about Elena Kagan. I have to ask, why is she asking for it now? I mean, timing is everything, right? And she's always been kind of one of the bigger, better arbiters of justice, I think, on that Supreme Court. But the timing's a little funky here, and I'm grateful for what Biden is saying, but what is going on, Elie? Why now?
Yeah, so to quote Sam Seaborn from The West Wing, let's ignore the fact that they're a little late to the party and embrace the fact that they showed up at all, right? Like that's my starting position, right? At least we are here now. Now, why does Kagan say this now? Because remember, Kagan signed on to the weak sauce ethics reform along with all the other Supreme Court justices, knowing full well that there was no enforcement mechanism when she signed on to it. So why now is she coming out with this idea that maybe there should be some enforcement mechanism? Well, I think that's because Joe Biden has shown up to the party late, and now he's interested in doing some Supreme Court reform. We already know that Kamala Harris has been interested in Supreme Court ethics reform, especially from when she was running for president the first time, right? So I think what Kagan is doing is sending out a little signal, because, she's not like, Brett Kavanaugh and them. She's not going to call up Joe and be like, hey, why don't you that's not how Kagan operates. Kagan actually has an ethical center, right? So what I think she is doing through the media is signaling to the Biden administration, signaling to a potentially Harris administration that there are some people on the court, at least I can think of 3 of them, who would be interested in taking this weak sauce ethics reform and making it something real by having third-party oversight. Now, the problem with Kagan's idea is that this idea has already been rejected by the conservatives. And I refer specifically to Brett Kavanaugh. People remember Dr. Ford. People remember his horrible confirmation hearing. But let's not forget, after he was confirmed, there were still 83 ethics complaints outstanding against Brett Kavanaugh. And 10th Circuit Chief Judge Tim Timkovich said that he could not rule. He did not exonerate Brett. He dismissed the 83 ethics complaints, saying that as a lower court judge, he had no authority to impose any kind of sanctions or penalties on Brett Kavanaugh, right? So this idea that the lower court judges can impose the Supreme Court's ethics reform, I think it's a great idea. Does Chief Justice John Roberts think it's a great idea? Do the other 6 conservatives think it's a great idea? Because if not, we still have a fundamental problem. So this is a good thought. This is a good kind of test balloon. And I think I am happy to say that it looks like people in power in the Democratic Party are finally getting the memo that the Supreme Court is extremist and out of control and needs to be brought to heel. But we have a long way to go from these kind of test balloons to actual legislation and actual reform.
Well, actual legislation has been pushed by people like Senator Ed Markey. He's urging the Judiciary Act to get passed, and that would be a 13-justice Supreme Court of the United States. It would be an expansion from 9 to 13. Why such opposition to this? I mean, it's been done before, albeit a long time ago, but it's been done before, and it invites more of a community of a discussion and a more balanced, I think, approach when it comes to dealing with some of the most momentous cases for the United States.
Yeah, people think that this is like baseball where 9 is some kind of sacred number. It ain't. The Supreme Court started with 5, went to 6, went to 7, went to 9, went to 10, then went back down to 9, and that's where we've been for a while. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says there cannot be more justices than 9. And here's the key about Markey's idea. Here's the key about expanding the court. The way that I've put it, it's expanding the court is like giving an elephant a tranquilizer dart before you put on the radio tracking collar so you can do all the other scientific things you want to do, right? I like ethics reform. I like term limits, but you can't get ethics reform and term limits past this 9-member Supreme Court. So you need to trank it with more judges before you can have all your nice things. To use the elephant analogy, if you do that the wrong way around, right? You try to put the radio collar on before you trank the elephant, you just get trampled, right? Like that's not a good day for the scientists. Expanding the court is so we can get justices on the court who think that there should be an ethics reform, who think that they should have term limits, and then you can pass your legislation and not get those pieces of legislation knocked down, essentially vetoed by the 6-3 conservative supermajority who believes that they are above the law.
It's like a horse cart thing. Quickly, Elie, before I have to let you go, your article that you dropped titled, "Beware the people who claim, quote, America isn't ready for a black woman president." I agree. We should beware. There's a line out of your piece I want to quickly read for our viewers, which I thought was so good. You say, "It's not enough for white men to be in control of all the levers of power. They and those who do their bidding also have to make everybody else feel like they don't deserve power and won't be able to have any, even if they try." Tell us, Elie, how do we remove and eliminate any of this defeatist attitude that goes into the idea of a President Harris administration?
Yeah, I just don't buy into the idea that America is not ready, because America has, by my clock, 6 months to get ready. Right? We got 6 months to get ready for what's coming. And that's the only important thing, right? America will be ready for a black woman president once America votes for a black woman president. And there are all these reasons why we should vote for Harris over the dictator who says that this will be the last election anybody has to vote for at all, right? Like there are all sorts of reasons to support Harris in this election, and America will get ready. This idea that it always needs to be later, that we are perpetually not ready for this or that change, that everybody's asking for too much too soon. Most other major Western democracies have already cleared this really basic low hurdle of full equality and electing a woman leader. We are behind. We are retrograde compared to the rest of the world on this issue. And so if Italy can do it and France can do it and England can do it, then you know what? I think America can do it too. Perhaps I have a higher opinion of America than the conservatives who say that we are not ready, that we can't get this done.
Well, to quote the great Kamala Harris, we're not going back. So if we're not going to go in reverse and we're only going to go forward, then I think it's time for our first female president. Elie Mystal, my friends, good to see you. Thanks for being here.